Welcome everybody to another episode of the Key to Games podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. We are finally back with the next part of our series looking at the shooter genre. And joining me, my co-host from Casual Game Studio, Joshua Reyes. It's been a while since I asked this of you, but how are you doing now?
Well, I'm doing good. I want to keep it short. I don't want to drown everybody out with my health concerns, but had to visit a couple specialists and thing like that. So we're gonna see possibly might have like an autoimmune disease. So that's what they're hypothesizing. So they're gonna pull pints of blood out, just like in Doom. And we're going to see how it goes from there. Other than that, I've still been managing to get some good work done during in between the bouts of sickness and stress testing stuff on Steam. So all of that has been going good. Josh, give me some good news. How about you?
Well, we played through Redfall, which I guess, speaking about pints of blood, I think that kind of goes with it as well.
How was that? How was Redfall?
It was just like, okay, like something is off about that game. You have a chance, you can, my review is up on the main channel.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely an interesting time. We are slowly but surely crawling over the finish line to 10,000 subscribers. I think we're like 99.79, something like that, as of last I checked. So we're going to do it soon, and I need to think of something special to do. So if anyone has any ideas,
like a 24-hour stream, something.
We need to still have our old man medicine
chat
showcase
for the 10,000K. That'll make everybody.
Exactly.
That'll be the best one.
And you also have your trip you're going on next week, too.
Yes, next week I'm going on a trip to Texas. My sister will be graduating with her master's degree, so it is a good big deal. So yeah, I'm going to see that. So definitely on my trip. So we can see if we can sure up any other Steam reviews or roundtables in between then, hopefully. So.
Yeah, we got a lot of catching up to do with podcasts and topics. Seth is, I think, moving around, or he may have already finished his moving, and Ramin is somewhere. We don't know quite where he's at right now, but if we say MMO enough times, he'll show up.
He'll show up. We'll summon him with it.
But for our topic this week, this is episode 3 of maybe 4, possibly 5, somewhere around there. 15, we'll see, of the shooter genre. So the last time, for those of you who forgot or didn't watch, episode 2, we focused on the kind of spectacle shooter era. This is the era of the 2000s, with the likes of Fear, Half-Life, Condemned, Halo, Gears of War, and so on. But for this week, we are now entering the 2010s, and specifically the era when more and more shooters began to adopt RPG elements and mechanics to them. So this is the rise of the role-playing shooter. So I think that's a good place to start with Borderlands. So last week or 2 weeks ago, I had my shocking confession of how much I didn't like BioShock. So I'm going to throw things over to you first. What did you think of Borderlands when you played it?
I'm going to have a shocking confession that I did not enjoy it very much at all. I did like what it was aiming for. You know, it had, the cell shaded graphics and some of the loot system was invented and some of the DLC was in there. But and of course the co-op play was fun too. But I didn't really catch on to it too much. Josh, how much did you get into Borderlands?
For me, I like the original concept, like way back with the first Borderlands.
The first one, Borderlands 1.
But it did start to kind of, I think, wear out its welcome for me as I got further in, and it's a really good, I think, microcosm into kind of what we view as, and this was a discussion I had with Craig Stern the other day about RPG design, RPG systems, that it kind of co-opted the raw elements of an RPG. Stats, gear, leveling up, but it didn't really, I think, do a whole lot with that. it's still, I think it's a real, I remember doing an article a long time ago about RPG abstraction design. And like, if we look at like these two universes, these two spectrums, on one end we have the likes of Fallout 3, Fallout 4, where it's a shooter, but it's more of an RPG than a shooter.
Right.
It's a game where you point your gun at an enemy and you fire. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to hit or do damage. It's based on what your firearm stat is. You know, did your attack crit when you shot them? On the other end of the spectrum, we have something like a Borderlands, where it's a shooter first. If you don't have good reflexes, it doesn't matter what level your gun is. But it never really, I think, evolved beyond that. And I guess here's a question for you and for the chat as well. What did you think of the loot design of Borderlands? Because I always found that to be a very interesting aspect of it.
Okay, now when you say interesting aspect, what exactly do you mean by that?
I think it's another case where they try to do too much in that respect. Yeah. Like it didn't. I think Arva put it really good there. Very hit and
miss,
which kind of describes some of the accuracy of those guns in that game.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think the main thing, you know, it was shooter first, right? And it felt almost as in, I think we were talking about God of War, how like the progression system and all that just didn't really seem to fit, right? And so Borderlands, it's like it put the mechanics there, but they didn't really fully meld together in the way that it should have, right? And then I think as each Borderlands continued, it even kind of made it worse. I think like Tiny Tina's Wonderland was like one of the standouts that was kind of like interesting. They did some changes. But yeah, it felt so disconnected. Like, again, like, yes, you could level up your guns and yes, you could but it really didn't matter in the end, right? Like you said, if you had good reflexes and this and that, you could still do it. There was no things like you said in Fallout where there was crit chances. Did you actually hit? What was your chances? What was the defense penetration of the enemy, etc.? So none of those things were there. So it was like almost half RPG-esque and really dissonant from the shooter aspect. So it didn't connect for me fully.
Yeah. And I think, too, all I was talking about, sometimes cool stuff, mostly crap. I think that really sums up kind of like the loot generation. This is something that when we get to like talking about like ARPGs, if we ever do like a Diablo 3 or just ARPG roundtable discussion, we'll have to get really more involved with like the proc gen of loot. Because that's another topic that I will talk about for like 4 hours easily on. And the problem that Borderlands had, and it was, again, something that it kept getting more and more prevalent as the series went on, was that the guns just lack that sense of personality. It's a good example, I think, of how, like, almost like untethered proc gen doesn't make a game more interesting. That, yes, you can generate 50,000 pistols, but if only 5 of them actually matter, or better yet, if only 5 of them can actually hit the target, what's the point there? And I think, like, on our show, or on the last episode, we kind of talked about the evolution of these spectacles. Sure, we have to talk about, I think, more about Bulletstorm later in this discussion, for sure.
Yes, definitely.
But when we talked about things last time, we got very experimental and unique weapons. Again, everyone remembers the gravity gun from Portal. Everyone remembers the variety of weapons from Halo. What was the other one? Again, Fear. Like, we remember good gunplay. We remember when the weapon feels good in our hands. Again, the Doom shotgun is one of the most famous weapons in all games.
Yes.
In
Borderlands, every gun literally felt the same, right? It was like I picked up a loot and it was like, okay, the stats are different. But it was literally nothing changed other than stats. And everything just felt so homogenous. Is that you know, everything felt the same. And like, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, they had like the different weapon manufacturers that did like alter like a major element of the gun. Like, you had the one that you just like throw the gun instead of reloading it. There's the one that was all explosions, like Torque, I think, and then he had his own DLC. But again, it's like, it's not enough to make these weapons feel different. And if a weapon is weird, like again, if it's a pistol that you shoot and every bullet just like goes like randomly across the screen, okay, it's fun for like 5 seconds, but when you're trying to fight a boss or make progress, will you ever think about using a weapon like that?
Right. And another aside note, that problem that I had with the game was there was just so much loot, and I had issues knowing which gun would be better. Like you'd pick up a gun, it's like, is this gun better than the other one? Like, is it really worth it? And
Mm-hmm.
so that was like, I don't know what there's got to be a name for that. Not hoarding, but like um picking. You're just like you can't tell the difference between any of the weapons, so they're just
I think I heard it's like either like decision paralysis or
decision
something like that.
paralysis. Yeah,
Yep.
decision paralysis.
And that to me is something that I see in a lot of ARPGs. I know I brought up the game The Adventures of Van Helsing at one point, and that one had that kind of issue where you kill an enemy and they drop like 5 daggers, 3 axes, 2 pistols,
Oh my gosh.
4 shot cannons.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, well I can only equip one weapon, so which one should I do? And it's the quite the opposite issue that I ran into with Victor Vran that I covered, or we played that last month. Victor Vran is very like loot shy. It's like 20 minutes, maybe you'll get a sword. Maybe something in the next 5 hours will drop a new weapon for you, and that's it.
Right.
And it's very hard to get that balance right. And Borderlands has that issue where, again, if a weapon drops and it's just like, again, like just in that sea of weapons, what is the point? And
Exactly.
it also renders the whole kind of rarity system kind of moot. Because it's
Exactly.
basically, here's your super rare gear, and here's everything else down there. Again, why? Why would you ever want to swap out that crazy Gatling gun rocket launcher that stuns and does electricity with a rocket launcher that maybe just does 20 more DPS?
Right. I think eventually, I mean, I didn't do a complete playthrough of the first one, but I think eventually just pretty much stuck to like one gun. And like every time a chest opened up with 1,000 guns in it, I was like, ah, and I just kept going because,
Yeah.
it's such a stop. And here's the thing, it's like, it stops the momentum so much. You have to
Yes.
stop and then look over each one. You're like, okay, 5 guns, and that's just a major stop in progress and where you're going. And then that can also lead to like after you figure out your guns, you're like, oh, what was I doing again? And so it's just that's not good for progress. So that's just another side note of that.
Yep, and it's why, from a quality of life standpoint, a lot of action RPG designers have been trying to make the loot decision making as quickly and as painless as
Hmm.
possible. If you remember from Diablo 3, they just simplify down to okay, you have 3 primary stats, damage, health, defense. You take
Cool.
this gear, raises your damage by 20 points, raises your health by or 80, this lowers your defense by 10. Okay, this weapon, all 3 numbers are green, it's better, put it on, let's move on, get back to the killing and the ARPG-ness. And a
Exactly.
lot of, I think, the whole like role-playing shooter genre in itself, it never, I think, solved that problem. It's like, okay, here's a new gun. This gun has reload speed 0.27 seconds, but the damage is now 15 DPS layer, but the spread of the gun is 0.5 degrees smaller. Is it better than my gun?
How am I supposed to parse any of that information, right?
Let me
And
pull out the graphing calculator, and I
yeah,
really am old with that
exactly.
one. And we figure that one out in the next 10 minutes.
That's what I did wrong. That's why we didn't enjoy Borderlands. We didn't
Hmm.
have our craft or our graphing calculators
Hmm.
out at all times.
And what you said a minute ago about how it breaks the flow up, and
Big time.
for part 4, when we talk about kind of the rise of the boomer shooter era and kind of how
Hmm.
things change in that front, they just basically said, okay, this is a shotgun. It does lots of damage in close range. This is a sniper rifle. It does lots of damage at long range. Okay, done. Go.
Done.
Use them.
Right. Right. And I mean, and like if you go, you can go back to, like take it from a classic like Bloodborne, not a shooter,
Mhm.
but you just have like at the start well, how many weapons? Two, three
You
weapons?
start with 3, and then I think
Three.
it's like maybe 9 or 10 total over the entire game. Like it was
Right.
nowhere near as bad as Elden Ring. So that one.
Or Borderlands, the amount of guns in Borderlands, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it's like you've said it in the previous episode, you'd rather have fewer guns
Mm-hmm.
that actually have an impact, have
Mm-hmm.
individuality, have some type of practicality, and a usage that differs from the other games and a reason from the other guns and a reason to use them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something really important, something that I think I prefer myself also, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I really do not like it. It is on paper, it sounds great having like all these amazing guns that are generated and this and that. But if they have no personality, if they have no uniqueness to them, again, it's just really, like you said, moot. So,
Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate that despite all these complaints we're bringing up, no one, I think, in the last decade tried to fix that. As
right,
Borderlands, excuse me, became kind of the blueprint for
right,
this idea of role playing shooting. And with kind of how things evolved, I will say one nice thing about Redfall, as we've been talking about, like Borderlands, it's the only one of these kinds of games that while there is leveling on the weapons, the enemies don't seem to level up. Because that is one of the things that always sucked about Borderlands. That the enemies will constantly scale. And when you get
scale,
into New Game Plus, it just feels like, okay, if I don't have the exact weakness to this enemy, it takes like 30 times more bullets to kill them. And
right.
this is, I think, where we kind of had like patient zero for this kind of like ludo narrative dissonance of RPG and shooting. I'm saying that now because I just did Ludo Narracon in the last 2 days, so I can tie that together. But it's that ever popular idea of I shoot a man in the head with my multi Gatling gun rocket launcher, and he's just like taking like 10, 10,
10,
15,
10.
0. And it's just like, okay, well, then what's the point of shooting?
I'm gonna have to go back into my brain. Did they even like react? Did they even like maybe every now and then like they
Sometimes.
sometimes
But
they got
like,
shot in the head and oof.
mm-hmm. And again, like we talked about Bioshock on the previous point, like that was something that just, when it first happened, like I shoot a guy in the head with a shotgun, and the only reaction is as health bar goes from this to this, that I just felt like the entire experience was like, like when like a balloon deflates, like that's
Yes.
kind of like how a Bioshock turned out to me.
Right. But BioShock review, like a balloon deflating.
Mm-hmm. And that could be an interesting point, Oliver,
Right.
about having like a durability or a consumable system.
Consumable. Yeah.
The game, what was it? Golden. It was the horror game that I played. Where are you? I can check my Steam list. Here, it was Golden Light. In that game, every weapon is like a durability or a consumable. And it's, again, like a very weird design of a game. And it does have that sense where you need to be really mindful of the weapons. And again, it's why you want to have things feel legitimately different. And when we talk about Stalker in a few minutes, that will certainly come up. But with Borderlands, I played the first one, the second, the pre-sequel. Thorn has been wanting me to do like co-op with Borderlands 3 at some point. Like I bought like the
Mm.
super fancy Ultra Collection on Epic like 2 years ago. I've never installed it, so at some point I should play that one. But to kind of approach Borderlands from a different angle, what did you think? And for chat as well, what do you think of the character, or I guess quote unquote class design that they implemented in Borderlands?
Um, it was neat. I mean, I think I'm trying to think of other if there was shooters that did it previously before. And I thought it was a good start, right? It definitely had some flaws in it. Um, thank you, Vince. Yeah, it already had some flaws, but I think um I'm not sure, Josh. Let me send this back to you. How do you feel about them?
Um, I think Barbara's like being me to the point there, like, and I think Mojo says, well, like, from a design standpoint, I like the classes having like different things to them, different aspects, but it never evolved more beyond that. It basically went, okay, this is the sniper rifle person, this is the shotgun person, this is the elemental damage person, and that's kind of all the decision making that goes into it. And with playing Redfall over the past week, it had that kind of same issue where actually it had the opposite. In that one, each character had like very cool powers, but there's nothing really defining like the gunplay. And it's that again, it's one of those cases where it felt like the first idea was okay but rough, but then nothing was ever done to try and correct it or iterate on it. Borderlands 2, they did have like the three like different trees, but again, it's that point of there are all these passives. Here's my double barrel shotgun. Why
Overrides
do I
that.
care about
Right.
like these weird things?
Honestly, I don't think I used. I can't remember what I mained, but I don't think I used any of the special powers. Really, it was just run and gun. Like,
The one that I did really like was when they implemented the playable psycho in the DLC for Borderlands 2.
oh
And like
yes,
his whole thing was he just goes berserk and he loses his weapon and he's just like running around smacking people with like a giant axe.
definitely.
And like that felt legitimately different.
Definitely. Yeah, so I guess in that sense, like if the special power would have taken the gun out of the equation or the equipment and
Mm-hmm.
instead fully focused on their special power, so like I'm out of guns, now I need to rely on my special power or
Mm-hmm.
something like that along those lines would have helped differentiate it more. To me, it felt like a start, very watered down and very rough.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think what games later. I'm sure there's some games later on that took it on much better as
Mm-hmm.
far as class roles. But I just felt it was really rough. Like, I mean, a lot of the things that they were doing, like the loot generation, the
Mm-hmm.
classes and stuff, were all kind of relatively new, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it was kind of their first shot. There was a lot of things they needed to work out, and I think they might have overfilled their plate, and it just kind of instead of conglomerating it into a more concise play experience.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the opposite thing that we saw with Assassin's Creed, where the first game was okay. It was kind of rough. They didn't really, do a whole lot. It was just more the proof of concept. And then they really knocked it out of the park with Assassin's Creed 2.
Yes.
With Borderlands, like the first one, I think is relatively considered highly regarded as kind of like,
Yes.
again, the test bed or the foundation for role playing shooters. But then it just never really, I think, got beyond that. It never really kind of solved its own problems. And, like, I'm trying to think, like, it got, like, again, like, they add more, but it was, again, more on top of a foundation that had issues with it. So it just made
Right.
those problems more and more prevalent.
Right. Correct. They were building upon a shaky foundation to begin with, and so it
Yeah.
eventually will crumble.
Yeah. And yeah, like to Mojo's comment, like with the game loaded, and there's a there's a trivia question from the past, like who here remembers playing loaded, uh, back in the day. There, we actually did play it like on stream, like I think last year, and it does not hold up at all. But yeah, again, it's that issue of okay, this character does more damage but has less health. This character has more health, does less damage, but everything else is just again filtered through the guns. So there's no real differentiation between how you play.
Right.
So with that, to kind of move forward from Borderlands, again, like Borderlands was ground zero for this. And as we'll talk about the division later, and kind of like the mid 2010s of like the RPG shooter genre, they all kind of began to become homogenized in that respect. But I think it's time to talk about one of my favorite games, and that is, of course, Stalker Shadows of Chernobyl.
All
This is
right. I've
one
been
of the.
waiting for you to gush
Mhm.
about this, Josh.
Stalker to me is kind of where I wanted this whole idea of RPG shooter to evolve to. And what they did was that it follows kind of RPG progression in terms of you start out with a pistol and maybe like sweatpants and a sweatshirt. Like that's all the gear you have. And as you play, as you get more money, you get more gear and more tools, and so your character levels up as you get more stuff. But there is no sense of abstraction. There's no gear rating, there's no leveling, there's no experience. Essentially, the gear is how you define your character there. So it keeps things within that realm of being a first person shooter, but kind of having the progression of an RPG or the equipment progression of an RPG. A shotgun, whether it is, a basic double barrel or, a high military grade shotgun, it still serves the same purpose. One just has a lot more bells and whistles to it. And I've always say the story like the first time you use like the double barrel shotgun and it actually cause like the whole screen to shift up because of the kickback of it. It's such a great sense of feel that you don't get in a role playing shooter where you shoot that shotgun and you're just shooting numbers at the enemy. It doesn't feel the
Right.
same.
Right. How did you feel about the gunplay in Stalker? I thought it was pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It was very solid. Again, what they did was every weapon had that same sense of like a real world application. A
Hmm.
machine gun fires differently than a pistol. A pistol fires differently than a shotgun. And it avoids a lot of those issues that we saw with the whole role playing shooter by that the weapons were kept very restrained. There's only a few kinds of pistols, shotguns, machine guns, and so on. But then it makes that much different. Going again from using a AK-47 to a super high tech paramilitary assault rifle is a very big deal. But it doesn't feel like you're grinding in that game. Despite the fact that, again, money is kind of your experience. Because the more money you have, the more you can buy, trade, and power up your character.
I think it felt so organic because, as a side tangent, the world building and the level design of that game, I believe, is like over the top. It is really nice,
Mm-hmm.
and so because you're so immersed in the world, I think that's why it holds a little more weight in that respect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just running around finding chests and this and that, it's like a real living world. There was like animals running around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Actually, another side note about this game is they use some really cool AI techniques. I don't know if they were the first one to utilize behavior trees, but they used behavior trees and some neural network stuff in
Mm-hmm.
it. So they use like two really neat AI things for the enemies to make them seem even more realistic. Also, so my personal favorite about the game is like the world building and the level design, and then also the AI. I believe those are some of the highlights of that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the whole thing of like having an AI life. I think this was a game that either coined it or popularized. I'm pretty sure a game older. I think maybe we used that when we were talking about the game as Seaman for the Dreamcast. Anyone remembers that one? But
Yes.
like as you said with Stalker, it was this idea that hey, there's a battle going on down there. That's not scripted. That wasn't, the game just throwing a battle there because they saw you approaching. No, it's because, the bandit faction ran into, the military faction. Now they're getting into a little shootout. And you can, loot those bodies for better gear. And again, it's completely unscripted like that. And yeah, but to your point about world building, the whole idea, like, I think this is the game that did the whole, like, horror shooter 1,000 times better than Fear. Because if you remember in Stalker, you had to go into the bunkers, you had to go
Yes.
underground, and suddenly there's no
Yes.
music, and it's all ambient and it's dark. And then there's that thing wandering around the distance, and you're going, wait, why does that thing have like 5 arms and it's coming at me? Or the what was it, the snorkers, the invisible guys, where it's like,
yeah, the snorkers, snorkers. Yeah, I think the snorkers. Let me see.
It's like all of a sudden, like, why does it look all discolored? And why is it getting closer? And oh my god, it's hitting me! What the hell is that? And the game does a really good job of kind of presenting this kind of like 2-tier system of enemies. You have your soldiers, humanoid enemies, and then you have the other. And it does a great job of weaving that kind of power dynamics really well. And even when you're like fully scoped up and wearing military armor with night vision goggles built into it, it's still very unnerving to go underground wondering,
yes,
where is everything? It's a completely empty tunnel. Like, where the enemies come from? Like, something's going to happen, you just don't know when it's going to happen.
Right. Yeah, it was really good at that. Very good at that.
Mhm.
And again, attributed that to the world building and the level design. Like, it really immersed you in it. And also it was based off of some books, right?
I think a movie, maybe.
A movie and a book, I believe. And so they had a lot of nice lore to build around. And so yeah, definitely. I mean that I would even argue that the world building in Stalker probably is better than like what I would say about Half-Life 2, even just because it felt so much more immersive to me. So I don't know about how you feel about that, Josh. Half-Life 2 or Stalker?
I'll throw that to the chat. We'll get a flame war going there. But yeah, like the idea that this world existed before the player,
Right.
that is notoriously difficult to pull off and make it feel genuine. Again, like when we talk about like Dark Souls and get to like the whole Souls-like genre at some point, that will certainly come up in spades then. But
side note, have we actually done an official Souls cast yet?
I think we maybe talked about in past. I don't know if we actually did one.
No,
I'll have to check the
yeah. Because if not,
there.
then that needs to be on the list soon.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I remember that critical. How to Survive. I think that was like the action RPG, like almost like isometric one, if I remember right. Yeah, but with Stalker, I think another thing that it did well, again, when you have fewer weapons and fewer gear, it makes each one stand out more. So there's a quest to find some strange or weird weapon that's, out in the zone and surrounded by lightning and those damn black hole anomalies that just like pull you in, you die. There's legitimate reason to go there. That weapon is entirely unique. It's a one-off. The issue with a game like Borderlands or like the whole role-playing shooter is that, yes, go on this raid for 30 minutes and try to get to the treasure chest, and it's like, okay, here's 5 different assault rifles. Okay? The only ones that actually matter were the legendaries, which were one-off weapons. But again, how many of those are you actually going to be dealing with in a game like a Borderlands or a Division?
Exactly. Yeah, where you have copious amounts of weapons and decision paralysis for days.
Mm-hmm. So with Stalker, it still holds up, although I think everyone would say that if you want to play it, you definitely want mods for it.
You need the mods. Gotta have the mods for sure.
Because there's a lot of them for that game. And I remember, much like with The Witcher 1, like the very first version of Stalker was like sometimes like borderline unplayable due to issues and things along those lines. But again, it did prove that this could work. And it's surprising again that we really didn't see a lot of Stalker likes after the success of it.
Right. I wonder if I can get some sales data on.
And while you're doing that, like one of the games that I think kind of follows in that trend could have been something like Hunt Showdown, which is the kind of like almost like a two-person battle royale, like shooter horror game. Which it's either one of those games that you will play all the time, or you are so put off by the skill level required that you'll never touch it. But
No, I'm not getting that. Not getting sales info.
okay.
Okay.
But I think like the lesson Stalker did, I think I want people to take away from it is that you can have an RPG or have that sense of progression without being so literal. That, your character is a level 5 soldier or this is a level 6 shotgun. You can just have kind of the go like as granular as just having weapons that have different stats.
Right.
This pistol is, about which point? About Hunt Showdown? Oh, I think I said Hunt Showdown. HUNT. I can put that in chat. I know how to spell showdown. There you go. But back to the point that you can have the kind of framing of an RPG without making it literal. And I think this is what I really wanted to see more of the genre go. That have, like, if you want to have, like, 5 different pistols, make them 5 legitimately different pistols. Have a pistol that's like an automatic one. Have one that's more like a hard-stopping single-fire one. And you can let that be your RPG instead of saying, okay, here's 20 pistols, highest level just automatically takes it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go RPG without, like you said, without being so literal. Just gear, simple. Like you can dither it down to just a simple aspect as your gear, what gear you get. Okay, and that in itself will give you a progression system and RPG without overloading you with all these stats and what's your defense, what's your power, and all these other things. When it could just be your gear, one simple thing, and that could go a long way. Again, simplicity. I think that's one of the failures of Borderlands 2 is it just went everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And instead, this one just went with 1 or 2 core ideas, and they really worked them in very well. And so it felt way more cohesive than compared to Borderlands RPG, loot system, etc.
And it makes that sense of, it gives it that sense of progression so much better in a game like Stalker, because a few minutes ago we talked about confusion of too many weapons in Borderlands. In Stalker, going from a simple 9mm pistol to your first automatic weapon, it's like trading in a Beetle for like a sports car. Like it's that big of a deal, and it feels that big of a deal when you switch to that machine gun and all of a sudden you're shooting multiple bullets a second rather than the one boom boom boom, and it gives that sense without needing to like spell to the player, oh my god, your pistol now does 87 more points of damage and 20% chance of electricity and it has a 0.07% chance of causing bleed.
Right. And that's literally impossible to pause. And maybe I'm a little more akin to when we get into boomer shooters later, where they kind of like concatenated it into just simpler. Each gun means something, each weapon means something, and so like that definitely is just so much more impactful, right? Like you said, you start with your gun, just like the nail gun, for example, in Quake, or the rocket launcher in Quake, things like that. And just in this type of game, where each weapon is so different and distinct. And when you get it, you're like, okay, this is a whole new world, and you don't have to parse stats and wonder about certain things. And you're sitting there thinking, oh, is 20% lead chance really worth my negative 15 DPS debuff? Like, so definitely.
Yep. And I think again, like before we like one final point for Stalker before we kind of move forward, like Stalker made the combat feel grounded, or more so, I guess it makes it feel very weighted and
very
like
weighted.
To me, I think that's a very important aspect of the shooter side rather than the RPG side. That I want these guns to feel like I hit someone, and it's not just a bunch of numbers. Like if I shoot someone, close range with a shotgun, I expect that guy to do more than just go, ow. I want
Right.
to see like the whole guy get like knocked back, or the enemy gets stunned. You can kind of fake that, I think, with some RPG design. You can, of course, have a shotgun that has plus 75% stagger or knockback or whatever, but you want the weapons to have that sense of weight. You don't want it to feel like you're just holding a number. You want the player to feel like they're holding a weapon that they can then use on these enemies.
Exactly. And that you're not just shooting a sponge that shoots out numbers, So,
Unless you're playing Enter the Gungeon, they have a number gun that just shoots out, or alphabet gun that shoots out letters at people. That's the exception to that rule.
that's the only allowed exception.
So, as we kind of move forward, and I'm trying to think if we talk about Bulletstorm this episode, or do we talk about it next episode? Because, like, Bulletstorm...
Other ones? Yeah, go ahead.
Because, like, Bulletstorm is kind of like that very weird place. It kind of began to embody what we saw with, like, Doom 2016, and making the shooting, the star again. So, maybe we'll say that for next week's episode for Bulletstorm, because it kind of fits more there. But there's still plenty of RPG shooting design to talk about in this one.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
So,
all right, so where do we want to go next?
Well, we can talk about either The Division or Shadow Warrior 2. Both of these, I think, have some really interesting role-playing shooting aspects to them. And
let's see.
Shadow Warrior came out in 2016, and The Division, I'm going to feel old when I look this up. Division came out in 2016 too. Wow, that's a surprise. Okay. But actually, before we get to that, we can talk more about like Call of Duties and the that, and even like Battlefield, how that evolved. So in the 2010s, as we said, with the popularity of Borderlands, we began to see more RPG systems begin to get adopted by major franchises, particularly multiplayer-based shooters. This idea that you can have different weapons of different rarities. You can have character progression. And this is when we kind of got to this era of, the perk deck or the perk loadout, where it's no longer about, here's 15 characters in an arena, go shoot, jump, kill each other. Now it's, okay, I'm using my customized assault rifle that has increased, stopping power but fewer bullets. And I have the perk that gives me, increased magazine capacity to compensate for it. And this is when and as I said on Twitter, like, this is when we kind of get into this, like, every shooter became an RPG side of things. Because, as we all know, Call of Duty is a better JRPG than Final Fantasy, right?
Definitely, yes. Except for 14. That's the only one.
So, here's my question for you and for chat. When we got to this era, where it's now about, customizing weapons and a lot of passives and stuff like that, what did you think about this? Because I have some thoughts myself, but I'll let you get in trouble first.
Okay, so I actually enjoyed them quite a bit. I did enjoy a lot of, like, I prestiged in a couple Call of Duty games. Don't tell anyone. Then, but I did kind of enjoy, that you're setting up the loadout, like you're setting up, you have your loadout, you set up everything. It's like you're prepping for your battle, and then you have your perks. And then it was like you can get your perks and other stuff as you level up. So it was like the RPG wasn't pulled so far away from the shooting. The shooting was still Call of Duty shooting, right? Perfect, amazing, some of the best shooting. And then it added that on. It did have some downsides in that, like, how do I know if my loadout is going to work? Is this the right one? And again, more decision paralysis about that. I'm not sure if this spread is going to help me. And then like testing it out in each level, you didn't know, was it the gun or was it just me not drinking enough caffeine? Like, and so there was, some issues with that. I think overall, it's good. I liked it more than I didn't like it. I wouldn't say I would like for it to continue. I'd like to see some new things instead.
Mhm.
And now, Josh, what's your thoughts on them?
I think I'm in that same boat. I did not play Call of Duty, however. You're talking to like the rare person who does not own any modern Call of Duty game.
No
The
way.
only one I own is Call of Duty 1, the original.
Wow, the original.
I have played a
Wow.
few free weekends of Call of Duty, but I have yet to
Okay.
actually have bought or spent any money in any of the other
Yeah.
Call of Duties.
Yeah. There was a short time where I was like slightly addicted to them for a little bit. And then, then the 14-year-old kids came for me, no scoping me. And I was like, I think I'm out.
And yeah, like as you said, like the idea of having this sense of customization on top of the gunplay is
Right.
such a big motivator. It's what I talk about in my RPG piece about why did everything become an RPG. Because guess what? It is very attractive. It is incredibly addicting
Very
to
addictive.
have that account level, to have that prestige level. You've just
Yeah.
unlocked 10 new shotguns, and now you
Yep.
have the double load shotgun perks, and now you can fit more bullets in. And it's this incredibly addicting way of allowing someone to specialize and customize what they're doing. But the problem, and the one game that I did play where it had this like very prevalent would be Payday 2. Like Payday 2 had, entire perk trees and passives and full weapon customization, is that it always felt at the end of the day it was solved. That someone somewhere out there has the perfect assault rifle build, or they have the perfect lifesteal build or mastermind build from Payday 2, and everyone else is either just copying it or they're doing it wrong. And like as you said a minute ago, like I would like to see someone do something more with it beyond it just being like, again, so easily solvable. Like when we talk about like CCGs, or when we talk more about that kind of design, it's very much in that same vein where we have meta decks, and there are plenty of meta builds for Payday 2, and I have never looked them up, but I'm fairly sure there's probably like one or two videos someone made on Call of Duty about, what is the best perks selection, what is the best sniper rifle to use.
Yep.
And I think it didn't solve the problem that was originally intended to do, which was again to create customization. It just, I think, pigeonholed it even more by now saying, okay, you have the increased critical chance on your pistol with the increased bullet stopping and with lifesteal, and now you're just practically immortal. Like, why?
Yeah.
Why would I turn off lifesteal, critical chance, increased damage? In a competitive or multiplayer game, why would I want less damage?
Exactly. So yeah, that is definitely a critical flaw in that. I wonder how you could solve that, like how we could evolve past that. I think.
It's a very tough problem because anyone who has played any kind of multiplayer game knows that people who play those games are exceptional at breaking down data. Like, they will drill this down into decimal points. You remember we were saying a few minutes ago about needing that graphing calculator to solve loops.
Yes.
Like, these people, they have like the full like corkboard conspiracy lines. Like,
Conspiracy lines.
they will figure it out exactly what 0.0065% more reload speed will mean versus 1.75 aim speed. Like, they
Yeah.
are fantastic at that. And the problem is, unless you just keep adding in more perks, unless you like change things or mix things up, it becomes solidified. And then
Right.
there's no reason to, try and solve it on your own, because by the time most people will join a game like a Call of Duty or a Battlefield or any game that has these kinds of systems, they have already been solved probably by the end of 48 hours of that game's release. Like, someone has
Yes.
already figured it out and has already made that video that says, okay, this is the best Call of Duty build. Use it and you'll get top. I don't even know what like top ranking in Call of Duty is these days, but you'll get to that in like 2 hours.
Right. And in a way that kind of makes like the whole progression system moot, right? When you can just get
Mm-hmm.
to meta instantly, and it's like, what exactly are we progressing and what exactly are we customizing?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not really allowed to do my own unique set because if I like something different, because I'm just gonna die. Right. So
Yeah, and that was the exact issue that I ran into with Payday 2. That, and I brought this up in an example a while ago, that Payday 2 had what was called the one bullet kill, where you want to make sure that all the choices, all the decision making for your weapons, it all came down to one thing. Can you kill a normal enemy with one bullet? Because if you can, that saves you ammo. That means you can do more killing. If you don't do that, you are not playing the game correctly. And when you're playing a team based or a multiplayer based game, everyone on your team, if they find out that you're not using the perfect
yeah.
build,
Yeah.
they won't say anything mean or nasty. They'll.
Nothing at all. They're gonna give you tips and advice
Mm-hmm.
and you know exactly how, hey, they're gonna send you the website links to the best.
They'll like send you a nice message saying, pardon me, dear sir, but I don't know if you know about this, but this is the best strategy.
Exactly. That's the good thing. At least the community is so nice in that
Oh yes,
regard.
especially League of Legends as well.
Yes.
They'll
Yeah.
give you all the advice,
All the tips. We'll have to do
nicely.
that. We'll have to do a
Ugh.
podcast about the League of Legends community and just how
Mm-hmm.
amazing they are.
Mm-hmm. Thor and I can have some nice stories about our time playing that in Dota.
Man,
And
no, I
yes,
never even touched Dota for that.
oh yeah,
Optimizing is the fun.
mm-hmm.
Okay, is
Yeah.
optimizing the fun
No, optimizing the fun out of the game.
out of the game? Yeah,
Yeah, but then Arv says optimizing is the fun. Like, again, like it's that very weird. It's a very narrow line I think you have to walk between figuring out what is the best or crazy combinations, and then just always going for that every single time. And then it just makes me. Yes, Vincent. It just makes the game feel unenjoyable to me. Like, it's also why I tend to not really. I think it's one of the reasons why I gravitate towards so many of the deck building roguelikes, where you can't, by design, you're not allowed to fully optimize in a deck builder because
right.
you know what you're going to get. You
Yeah,
can have a game plan, but if the game throws you all, if you want all like lightning cards and the game just throws you bleed, well, guess what? This run, you're going to be a bleed strategy, whether you like it or not. Go roll with it. And it's again why I think I really have grown to like more roguelike design rather than more competitive design.
exactly. Yeah, and then I think when we've talked about all the other issues with competitive design, from community to just the anxiety of playing competitively on teams, etc. Um,
Mm-hmm.
those things are definitely all a part of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, it gives you lemon to make a bleed bill. Sounds like something Cave Johnson would say from
Yeah.
Portal. Ooh. Let's see. So, anything else with Call of Duty? And before I forget, we also have to talk about Warframe, because if we're talking about role
Oh
playing
yeah.
shooting,
Yes.
Warframe is a major one
Warframe,
there.
definitely.
But
I mean, there got to be something else about Call of Duty. Let me think. Um, did it really? I mean, other than what else did it introduce that was new?
We had,
and
the
then
kill streaks.
kill streaks.
Prestiging, I think, was original to Call of Duty. I think that was the
Okay.
first one to actually have that ability that now when you go back to rank 1, but then you unlock, gold guns, or you give the player something new.
Fun fact: Bioshock 2 had multiplayer, and I prestiged on that twice.
Nice. Oh yeah, we never did talk about Medal of Honor in the first episode. We gotta figure out how to fit that in somewhere.
Like the fifth one would do like a recap on what we've missed.
There we go. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, the grind is real in Warframe for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. That kind of turned me off a little bit. It's a really amazing game, but the grind is rough.
Let me see. We talked about Call of Duty. We can talk about the Division as well. Yes, exactly, Vincent.
Oh, the Vetigs.
Yeah, let's go to Warframe. Then we'll talk about we'll kind of fit the Division and Shadow Warrior, and then we'll kind of take stock there and see where we're at after that.
I got a question for you before we get to Did you play Warframe when it first came out?
I did not.
Okay. So how long into it?
I want to say like 4 or 5 years. I think it was like 2017, 2018 was when I tried Warframe.
Yeah, because I tried it when it first came out. And of course, when it came out, it wasn't the best. It had potential, and but we'll get into later, how the developers kept improving it and allowing the community, like taking community feedbacks. Bugs became bugs became intended, or I forgot the saying. They literally put bugs and kept them in the game, and did so many interesting facts, interesting things to the game. And I think right now it's like one of the most solid games in that respect.
I remember like watching footage or hearing about the game, and it just sounded like another multiplayer shooter.
Right.
It just felt like, okay, the whole point of this game is just play, 20 matches a day. Like, it didn't have any sense of carryover. It never felt like it was evolving beyond just arena or multiplayer shooting. It's the same issue that I had with something like Overwatch versus Team Fortress, where Team Fortress felt like the game evolved over the many months and years of its support. With Warframe, it had that same kind of point. And then, as you said, things change. It began like, it's a really good study, I think, of that rare time where a developer just said, you know what? Take it down, rebuild it, relaunch it. And it was kind of like, it became like a really solid model for a live service game.
Yeah.
Long before anyone was really thinking about live service in this general respect.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely broke ground in that respect for sure. And I'm trying to think, probably that, and maybe again like Final Fantasy 14, which was brought down and totally updated. There's very few games where the developer was like, okay, we just gotta cut this and redo everything because it's not working, and that takes a lot to actually do that, and it paid off in both cases.
Yeah, and I do wonder if they weren't aiming for multiplayer, if these were like strictly single player games that had that same level of failure, would they have done it? And I kind of part of me would think no. That if this was just a single player game, 8 to 10 hour long, whatever, okay, it fails, put in the loss column, we move on to the next.
Right.
But again, with multiplayer, and I think this is something that I've talked about this before, like multiplayer brings in the money. That there is no question that a successful multiplayer game and a successful live service multiplayer game to boot, it does become a license to print money. It is very high risk, high reward in that respect. So if you have like the basic bare bones, why, if you can make it work, you're going to try and make that happen. Because as we've seen with Warframe, and as we saw with Final Fantasy XIV, they are earning major money. Final Fantasy XIV, last I checked, I think it has like either like 2.7 or 3 million subscribers a month.
Yep.
It is now considered, again, the most played MMO on the market today. It has beaten World of Warcraft after, where are we at now? Like 19 years of World of Warcraft now?
Yeah. Well, only 19, not too long.
Yep, and to Mojo's comment, yep, and again, that is always true. Like, if you release a game that's bad, it takes, like, moving heaven and earth sometimes to make that right. And we saw, unfortunately, with a game like Back for Blood, and even, with their previous game, Evolve, that it's oftentimes considered too little too late. And especially, I think the other advantage I think the other advantage that Warframe and Final Fantasy XIV had was that there really wasn't a live service market back in 2013. Again, you had MMOs, but that was it. Like, you either made an MMO or it wasn't really considered a live service. Today, there are far more live service and free-to-play games than one could ever play.
But I don't even know, did we consider like MMOs live services, or it was just an expectation of an MMO, right?
Yeah, it's a very weird middle ground between like a live service these days.
Yeah.
But to bring us back to Warframe, when it evolved, what they did was, once again, they built this entire framework around the shooting. Like, the basic gunplay and basic combat Warframe, I don't think it really has changed in the past, like, 10 years. It's going to be this year. But what they did was they just added so much stuff on top of that. And I think to bring this back to Borderlands, it's the opposite situation. Like, Borderlands, they had a very shaky foundation, and they just kept adding more and more to it, so it never really seemed to grow. With Warframe, the gunplay and general motion was good, so let's just keep adding more and more to that since we already have the foundation done.
Yeah, because when I played it when it first came out, and it was like, I think it was a lot of single player like stuff you would do, and the movement and the shooting and everything, all the mechanics of the game were so solid, like to begin with, right? There was no like, oh well, the controls feel floaty, or the gun aims feels weird, or none of that. It was completely solid. Your player felt good to control, like we talked about, moment to moment. Gameplay was there, and simply building on top of it, adding so much things that you can do is really what led to its success, and it just having a solid foundation and going from there.
Yeah, and they did the wise thing that the intro of the game is not really like front-loaded with like a lot of lore and exposition.
Right.
Or Warframe, there's aliens. Get in your ship and go.
Exactly.
And then they add more story as you get further in. They have the lore quests and the expansions and all that. You want the player to care about the game first before you try and like force them to care about the game.
That's a side tangent, right? Like trying to force a player to care about a game through like exposition or like whatever, when they literally haven't even moved their character around, that's really hard to do. So doing it the other way, like you said, letting the player get into the game, understand it, and then like, oh, well, now I want to know more about the game. Tell me more about the story. And then when you deliver it in the right increments, in the right time, then they become fully invested. But forcing a player to become invested prior to playing it, this doesn't usually work. I will usually skip it and then not know what's going on.
Nope. And they'll get tired of it. And it's kind of, again, like that very weird thing we see being, and again, like, here's my own side tangent. It's kind of like the difference we see in, like, good gacha games and, like, bad ones, where really good gacha games really develop characters and make them interesting. They give them lore. So when they have a big character announcement, the entire fan base freaks out about it. I've seen this with Arknights. I see it to a lesser extent in Limbus Company. And then there are some games like, here's a new character, and everyone's just like,
what? Okay.
It just means it's another $200 roll for me to try and get.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. And so, yeah, I mean, games that does Genshin Impact do a good job of that? I don't
Uh,
know.
I told you I played Honkai Star Rail last week. I've already
Yes.
uninstalled it, and yeah, it was just like, okay, here's all my free rolls, and I got nothing.
Awesome. Awesome.
I feel really powered there.
Did you do a highlight stream of it of your gushables?
Nah. But to go back to Warframe, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I think this is the point where a lot of people either check in or they check out a Warframe. And that is the progression. That is the grinding and the cards and the in-game store that is like it's like 10 free-to-play game stores all combined in like this like massive blob of monetization. It is a very like Warframe, like to Digital Extreme's credit, like they really kind of figured out the monetization they wanted to do, and they ran with it so much. But it's still very daunting to look at this game and go, okay, I'm going to load it up. Hey, maybe I want a new gun. Let's go to the store. Here's 87 guns with different pricings and different characters. Or you can go and find the parts and grind them. Exactly, Vincent. The game is free, but it feels like a 9. No, it feels more like a 9 to like 2 in the morning sometimes.
Yeah, 9 to 2 in the morning for sure.
Mm-hmm. And again, like it shows, I think it both exemplifies and it also kind of kills why RPG progression is so popular. Because again, all this stuff adds up to more choices. It adds up to more guns and cards and warframes. But at the same time, it's like, well, if I just want to walk around and shoot or stab an enemy, no, I need to make sure I have all the cards right. I need to make sure my weapon is fully modified. And if I want to try out another Warframe, oh no, you either have to spend the money or, spend the next few days and literally like days and maybe even weeks of grinding. And then you have to have your 3D printer print each part of that weapon out.
And doesn't that part, the crafting part, take like 2 days or something?
Real time
like,
days.
Real time, yeah. I think when I was like, real time, okay, I'm not playing anymore.
Mm-hmm. When you see a game tell you come back in 72 hours for your gear,
that's
like
your
the
flag.
That's a point you're either going to say, "Oh, sure, I'll come back," or "Nope, I'm out. See you later."
Definitely.
And again, it is such a great example of just how much you can layer on top of, third person shooting and third person melee to make it stand out. They add in, mech battles in space. There's guild spaceship wars you can do now. They even add in eventually like an open world map so you can explore with like 3 people. And all of this, again, is built off of just third person shooting and moving.
Right. Yeah. Oh, excellent.
And we really, again, like, they have no reason to ever, build a sequel to Warframe. Like, I don't think it would even be possible to do that right now.
I don't, it would be really bad. Like, it would cost an absorbent amount of money, and there's just no reason to when they have where it sits right now. The engine's fine. You could do some upgrades to it, but like keeping it running is probably as is the most popular, is the most ROI you can do on it right now. Like,
and like they control like the whole game. Like it is their entire thing. Although I think didn't they get picked up by Tencent, or like Tencent does have a somewhat of a stake in them?
Like a stake in them, yes, I think they do.
And same goes for Path of Exile, which is kind of funny because both games came out in the same exact year. Again, I say this in my books a lot. Like sometimes real life is stranger than fiction in these cases, where you have like the same kind of mega success coming out within months apart from each other. And yeah, like Warframe, like to me, is like when we talk about this idea of like a RPG shooter, is probably like the textbook example of what that can mean.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So if we were like comparing, like Borderlands to Warframe, it's
Hmm.
just night and day on like how well
Hmm.
it's put together in Warframe compared to like um, you know, Borderlands, which Borderlands did try to go for some of the same things, just with different mechanics and stuff like
Hmm.
that, but they tried some of the similar things. And just Warframe just really perfected it, kept hammering away at
Hmm.
it, taking feedback, and they've really polished it to like an excellent game.
Yeah. And I think like one last point for me before we move on to the division and like that era, before we'll we may wrap it up out of division because I think we're about an hour and 10 in. But
Okay.
one last point about Warframe again is that it felt satisfying to move and shoot. Like
Yep.
you can't like if you're going to make like an RPG shooter or shooter RPG, however you want to define it, you need the general motion and gameplay to feel good before you start adding stats, before you start trying to create loot tables and gear rating systems. If the player doesn't feel like it's enjoyable to get into a firefight, no amount of stats and mods and whatever is going to keep someone around. And
Yeah,
again,
it's only
it's
going to dilute the experience and like
mhm,
make it more cumbersome.
yep. And again, it's why Warframe. Like I kind of think like that could have been why they decided to do the retrofit. That they knew the basic gameplay worked, but it was the implementation that they first had that didn't work. They were trying to be another Team Fortress or another. I'm trying to think of other shooters around that era, like another like Quake Team Arena. Because Overwatch came
Yeah.
far later, so it definitely wouldn't be that. But they basically said we have something good, we just need to package it differently.
Yeah. And again, like that's amazing. Like it's something that game developers should always be ready to do when we talk
Hmm.
about, the my baby syndrome and we can't change it and this and that. Things do need to be chopped. Things do need to be axed if they're not working. And then you need to change things around and not be afraid to change them, right? You cannot
Hmm.
fit, is it a square hole in the round
Square
peg?
peg
Either
in a
one.
round hole, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
That one. So you can't do that, without having like the basic mechanics of it being very well and being
Hmm.
solid. And then, just throwing everything you can on top of it and hoping that'll fix it. And like as you said, it doesn't work. And I
Hmm.
can really I cannot think of a game that doesn't control well and plays well that people like to play.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, other than maybe Skyrim. I don't.
There we go. We had to get in a Skyrim slam at some point in this discussion. And I just realized, as another off topic thing, we will have to talk. I think there's probably is at least a mini cast about hero shooters and talking
Yes,
more about class based design. We can talk about Apex and Overwatch, or even bring back Team Fortress in for that point. We'll
definitely.
we'll see how that fits. But as we entered the 2016, this I think is a really good kind of final point for this week's episode because we're now getting to where kind of shooters would bounce back. But 2016 brought us The Division, and even a game like
Hmm.
Shadow Warrior 2. And I
Oh
really
yeah,
liked Shadow Warrior 2. It got really good gunplay, but then it had that same issue that Borderlands had that it just became bogged down by all the looting and all the different stats on your guns. You just want to, jump around and fight demons as a ninja. But
right.
let's talk about the division because I think if Borderlands kind of set like one standard, I feel like the division possibly set another with how gear progression began to work in games. So I'm going to throw it over to you again to chat. What did you think of the division?
I have literally very okay. So when it came out, it was a bit broken,
Hmm.
and so I never jumped back into it again. There was a lot of issues with it, for me, so I didn't really get to play it too much or enjoy it. Only studying through it. I studied some of the AI stuff that they used, but I don't have too much information on it. Josh, did you get into it? Did you play it?
I played both of them, but not beyond like a lot of, like, the main story, like whatever
Right.
the cap was. I hit that in both, and then I was just like,
Yeah.
okay, man, I played it, like it's done, but it is one of those games that yes, Zara, like it's one of
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
games where I always felt that there was a better game in my head than the one that
Yeah.
I was playing. If that makes any
Yeah.
sense.
That makes complete sense. And I know I personally know a few people who worked on it, so I'm gonna try not to be too mean. The level design. I don't know what you thought of the level design. It
It felt like they were trying to make like real life gaming to me. Like it
yeah.
felt like, okay, I walk into this room. Oh wait, I see chest high sofas over here in a chest high box. Oh, I guess that means they're going to spawn like 27 guys in at me.
Right. Right.
And I think like to kind of take this full circle, like when I said how much I loved Stalker or how it had like these quasi RPG elements and it worked, the Division I felt would have been like the anti-Stalker. That it was so like gamifying or RPGifying the mechanics and the systems that it just kind of lost me. That okay, I'm in my perfect cover. I'm shooting a LMG at this guy who's walking at me, but because he's considered an elite, he's just shaking off as I'm, full auto, putting in like dozens of rounds, and then he just walks behind my cover, go boom, and now I'm,
Yep.
bleeding out.
Yeah, the bullet sponginess of that game really threw me off, and there was some bad stuff in the dark zone that I can't remember. I think I blocked it out. That I did not enjoy.
You went dark?
Yeah, the window.
Oh, yes. And it had, again, like, I think it had some pretty solid elements to it in terms of this kind of, like, again, more grounded take on shooting. Like, if you and, like, four friends are going through some of these areas, it can be kind of fun to have people set up in different positions and
Yeah,
planning things out. But it's always being hampered, I think, at least to me, by the RPG elements. This is the game for me, I think, that definitely created the idea of the gear rating system. This idea that, oh, you can be a really great, FPS player, but, oh, your knee pad is only level 5. And because only you haven't found a level 7 knee pad yet, all the enemies are going to be stronger than you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
right. Yeah, I mean, like it had like the gear and loot to me. I didn't like how it really fit in the
Mm-hmm.
game. Plus, it also had crafting, right?
Yeah, you could put like mods and random
Yeah,
attachments.
yeah, and so like I feel like, and then I think it also had talent trees, also, if I remember
The
correctly.
second one for sure had like
Sure.
talent
Yeah.
trees.
Yeah, and just all of that again, it was just I didn't really enjoy the gunplay that much either. I don't know how you felt about it.
I was like middle of the road with like I didn't hate it,
Wasn't a
but
failure, but there's just much better shooters out there that feel better moment to moment. And then when you pile all those other, the gear ratings and the specializations and things like that, I think it just got too muddled down in
mhm,
that respect.
yeah. And I would have loved like one of the things that always like hurt the division for me is that it never felt like I was really getting cool stuff or getting more powerful. Like you only have like I think it was like one or two like special skills or like one ultimate skill. And they
Right.
did this again to try and balance the multiplayer around. But it always felt like I was only building maybe like a quarter of an interesting character. It's a very similar complaint I think that we'll have about Redfall. That you have 4 different characters to choose from, but none of them feel like a fully complete and robust, interesting person. It felt like, okay, if I could take the jumping power of this one, and the super sniper of this one, and the teleporting of this one, hey, we have something. But no, we're not allowed to do that.
Right. Correct.
Let's see. Yeah, to Melinius, yeah, like, again, like, when we talk about, like, this live service, like, RPG shooter, like, this is definitely where we got the MMO influence of, you know, you have to level up, you need your guns, and they even, you know, threw in, you know, raids in a shooter. And to Aubrey's comment, yeah, like, I think it could have worked if they either went more like in a Warframe direction, you know, like give us like full on customization, let us create these amazing builds, or they went more like down to earth, like make it like imagine like a live service like Rainbow Six, not, you know, Rainbow Six Siege, but like a Rainbow Six style, super grounded, super challenging shooter, and, you know, have that with like 4 friends.
Definitely. That would be good. And also another thing about The Division, I also forgot about that, like the marketing campaign that it had to Averick per Kelly's. The Division was a pinnacle of selling the game on graphics and physics trailers and not delivering on the aspect. I think that was the one where you could close behind the door, and like that was like a big thing in the E3. They were like, you can open a door in a car and stand behind it, and like, yeah, so like it was overselling what it was going to do, and then it didn't pull it off. So that was another like kind of downfall for me.
And the whole world, like, it just felt, as I said a few minutes ago, it felt like they were trying to turn the real world into a video game. But in like the most basic and like soulless sense. Like, if you remember with Fear and being able to like shoot up entire rooms and, you know, hit enemies from like behind doors, this one, it just felt so fake. And again, like, I think this is a game that really put off a lot of people from like cover-based shooting. This idea that, you know, if you're not behind cover, you're instantly dead, and if you're behind cover, well, now you are, you know, a brick wall or a stone wall of a bullet defense.
Definitely. Yeah. And me, myself, personally, you know, I'm not a fan of cover-based shooting. It slows down I mean, it does have some places, but again, to me, it really slows down moment to movement, progression. It's like, okay, I got to stand behind here. And again, compared to something like push forward combat, which is just way more engaging and way more, you know, literally pushing you through the level. And instead, I'm standing behind a 8-foot couch and just like healing up. You know what I mean? It doesn't really immerse me in there. And I do completely agree with you. Like, the levels felt so staged and fake, like beyond most games that I can remember. Like, even like a Call of Duty Michael Bay setup didn't feel a setup as some of the levels in that game for me.
And speaking about like the Ubisoft market, I have to mention like when they did like the first trailer for like Rainbow Six Siege, and like someone like said, "Oh, I'm sorry guys, I didn't kill the person." And everyone seems like, "Oh, we understand. We get it, it's okay." And everyone goes, "That situation will never happen in a million years in a multiplayer shooter." Just like in League of Legends, when they're all
just
kind
like in League
to
of Legends, yeah, they're so nice there. I mean, when I'm feeling down or I need some pick me up, I go in there and get into chat, and I'm uplifted.
Yeah, but if you're really feeling down, you know, someone will like send you like some chocolate, you know,
definitely
some flowers. You know, they really love you in chat in a League of Legends or a Call of Duty game.
Just an amazing community. Again, we're gonna have to do a community podcast about it.
Oh yes, but yeah, like, and I guess to start to wrap things up about the Division, even to extend with Shadow Warrior, that again, like, it's one of those cases where there's so much gear being dropped, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. And that's when we get to the whole gear rating. And, like, actually, the first game I ran that actually had gear rating would have been DC Universe Online. That they did that for, like, their rates. So you couldn't do certain rates if you didn't have, like, the right average of gear. And then the Division would carry on with that with their system. And the reason why they do that, it basically affords infinite grind. Because you can just keep throwing more and more numbers. But again, it got to that point where it's like, okay, I really like this assault rifle, but it's only ranked 1000. If I need to get better stuff, I need to find a 1700 weapon. And even if I don't like that, I still need to equip it in order to trick the game into giving me better loot.
Right. In order so I can even get into the raid. Exactly.
Yep. Mechanics, yep. And again, like, it's why we see these kinds of systems to give you this kind of greater sense of power, but at some point it just falls away. It's why I've said that I have built so many characters in Diablo 3, but the second I hit level 70, I'm like, well, yep, this character's done. Like, what else am I going to do for this character other than just get more numbers?
Right.
And when your game treats its gameplay strictly from a numerical standpoint, it just kind of loses that impact, in my opinion.
It's almost like, I don't know if you remember, like, of course you remember, but like the old arcade games, and they'd have a score, and I could care less about the score,
Yep.
right? It's like, I'm just playing for a score. Like it doesn't, and then you're ranked. They'd put you on the arcade and rank this and that, and it's like you feel like you're just playing for numbers instead of playing a game and enjoying it, right? And that is something that I've never really enjoyed, and I always thought was kind of like kind of like a handicap, or like a band-aid for game design choices, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, everybody else did a score. Let's do a score. That's it. And there's so many other ways you could go about it. Like, for example, take some examples from Warframe, things like that. You know what I mean? So it's just number, increasing numbers, and then eventually the number is so high where you're going to need an in post squish, and then start all over again. So yeah.
Yep. Yep. And again, to like melee combat, like, at what point does even the act of shooting not really matter?
Right.
Like, if someone can just take a super high level sniper rifle and kill someone, okay. But then if they take a sniper rifle and, this character is, 5 levels above them, so now headshots don't matter.
Yep.
Then, like, how does that make the gunplay feel interesting? It either matters all the time, or it matters none of the time. And it's why a lot of these games, like, the whole act of leveling just feels like padding. Like, it doesn't matter if I get a level 5 gun, because once I hit level 6, the level 5 gun is now useless. Only thing that matters is, level 1, and then, level cap.
Yep, that's it. Yep.
Let's see. Anything else about RPG shooters that we didn't cover yet? I'm sure we've forgotten a few games by now.
I know we've definitely forgotten a few games because there's so many. I don't know if get into Mass Effect. No.
Is Mass Effect considered? I guess it's kind of considered a third-person shooter.
Is it?
I guess, like, very quickly, for those of you who want to know how long I spent playing Mass Effect, I would say I spent a sum total of 35 minutes. And then I was just like, nope, I do not want to do this anymore.
I probably maybe like 10 minutes. 10 minutes, and I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this. And everybody was like, but the story's so great and you'll love it. And I was like, this doesn't feel good to play. It's cover shooty. Yeah, I did not enjoy Mass Effect. What turned you off from Mass Effect? Just
like that general like gameplay just didn't feel good.
It did not feel good at all. Like again, like Skyrim shooter or something. Like it was not good. And everybody's saying, well, the story is really important, but it's like, well, would I rather watch a movie or read a book or play another game instead of playing this one, where it's mainly like story based. And then again, there was a big controversy with the story at the end of Mass Effect 3. So it really didn't even pay off in the end anyway. So,
so here's a question: between Mass Effect, Skyrim, and taking shots at Warframe, which one will get us canceled this week?
Skyrim.
There's the poll for this week. Which one will get us canceled by the end when this goes up recorded?
I think Skyrim. Taking shots at Skyrim is too beloved. Do I even have? Yeah, I have a copy right behind me. So
Yeah, but again, like with Mass Effect, and even like going back to like Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, like it never felt, I guess, good to shoot in those games.
yeah.
And if
Oh
your
my
whole
gosh, Fallout 4. So that's that was that was some of the worst gameplay gunplay for me personally. Like I mean, it was cool. Like the lock on thing. What was it called?
the VAT
Uh,
system.
yeah, that system. That's interesting. And I would have rather had like the whole game be a VAT system, or like more like instead of like in between the VATs, it's terrible shooting. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, um,
Oh yes. Oh, I just remember one other role playing or RPG was shooter that we didn't bring up. That was again like kind of ahead of its time, but also not that much. Was Vampire the Masquerade
hmm
Bloodlines.
hmm
Way back in the day. I think that was like 2003, 2004, actually.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, like that was again like one of those games that really, really try to combine like tabletop RPG character progression with third and first person combat. But it again, like to what Alwinia said earlier about are they still shooters or are the crafting levels? Like it is all levels in RPG in that game. Like
yeah.
it's a game where you pull a shotgun and if you're only a level 1 firearm, the shotgun is like 5 points of damage. If you're at level 10, with firearms, then that shotgun is like 500 points of damage, and
Right.
it acts like as you would expect a shotgun to.
Yep. And let's.
Anything else? Talk about the issues between skill and abstraction, why loot design. Yeah, and that's true, Melanie. It's like with all the patches and fan made stuff, it has become a
Yes.
very competent and very well received third person kind of RPG. And again, the same thing we could say for Stalker in terms of all the fan made patches and work that went into that to really prop that up. I forget
You're making me want to play Stalker this weekend.
I forget like the one like patch or the one mod everyone says to download, like the one that's like a complete rebalancing. It's not Stalker Clear Sky, right? I think that's just the name of the the third expansion, but there's like one of them that just completely like upended and made everything good in Stalker.
Wow. Okay. You got to remember the name so that way I can download the correct mod this weekend.
You can play it on the plane ride.
Yes. I'm playing on the people are going to be hearing screaming and all this stuff.
Just what you want to hear on an airplane.
Yeah. It's perfect. Yeah. Perfect ambiance.
All right, but I think we'll say goodnight here. If anyone can think of other shooters with role playing elements that we didn't cover, let us know in the comments down below. But when we come back next Saturday, we'll be talking about kind of how shooters bounce back in the 2016s with the likes of Doom 2016, Push Forward Combat. We'll finally talk about Bulletstorm. We've been hyping that for like 3 episodes.
Yes,
now.
yes.
But
that's one of my favorite shooters. I love Bulletstorm so much. What about does Last of Us even fit in there as a shooter?
I don't know.
There's a gun.
Is The Last of Us the new Stalker? Let's throw that to chat.
There you go.
There's the final comment to end on for this week. But
my final point.
Call of Duty is better JRPG than Final Fantasy. The Last of Us is a better shooter than Stalker. There's some
Skyrim
sound
has the
clips.
worst combat ever.
And Mass Effect as well.
And Mass Effect.
But we will be back next Saturday starting around 5 p.m. ET for the show. So for me, do all the liking, subscribing, bell ringing, all that stuff YouTube tells you to do. You'll find links in my Discord, Patreon, all that down there and up there.
Same thing for me. And thank everybody for understanding my health issues. I'm sorry I've missed a few episodes. Hopefully we're getting that all situated soon. With my doctor's appointments coming up soon, and we can get everything back on schedule. Again, like, subscribe, buy Josh's books, join the Discord so that way come up with topics for us, and don't forget to check out my links down below. And if I missed anything, Josh.
I think that is good. We'll be doing some more Steam page store reviews. We got more roundtables planned. And if you do have suggestions for topics for future shows, let us know either on the Discord, in the comments, and all that great stuff. But with that said, everyone, have a great rest of your weekend and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where you some of the art and science of games.